If this is a minority group, if this is a small meeting, may I be blessed with minority groups and small meetings for the rest of my life. As an elected representative and as a member of this community, I have never been prouder than I am today of this community. The work that you've done over the last 3 months is outstanding. It's an exemplary example of the way communities can organise in order to get things done. Well done to you all.
I don't want people to get too caught up on the vocal minority issue. This is a good turnout, and I applaud you all for putting in the effort. But the one point I'll make is that it's not just about this development, and this is not the best time to be providing a lot of the input that's come in through the submissions. As I said, we haven't simply come up with an idea for this site. The site's been through an extensive process through council of identifying growth areas across the city and setting the controls and development targets for a site. As a company, we go out and identify sites based on what they're zoned for, what the councils have identified them for, and the development controls. So we work within that framework. A lot of the input that's been coming in relates to that strategic process. And I can guarantee you, having worked in strategic planning both in council and state government, that it's near on impossible to get this level of engagement when those planning policies are being developed. So regardless of our disagreements over this site, and regardless of this process, I can only encourage you to keep the organisation going. And if you want to shape and influence what the community looks like, you need to get in and start influencing council when it goes through that strategic planning process.
You're not listening to us, though.
And Lifestyle 2030. And again, as I said, we develop based on what the controls and what the council guidelines propose. We've expended a lot of time and effort based on what council have told us through those controls should happen on these sites. So you need to get involved as early as possible. I mean, there's issues that have been raised through submissions about not wanting 3 stories. That's an easy fix for council, because council have got a 10-metre height limit on the site. If the community doesn't want 10 metres, council can change that height limit to 8 metres like it is elsewhere. They can change the zoning, they can change the development control provisions, because that's ultimately what the development will be assessed against. And you need to get in early and influence those so that it provides certainty to developers, so we can look at sites and understand what the council expectations are and what we think we can yield. Because when you get to a point where we are now in the process, where all of those controls have been set over the last 10 years, and most of them have actually been reviewed in the last 18 months and reinforced by council, it becomes problematic. And you can appreciate that we've spent a lot of time and effort in developing this application based on those controls. So, again, I think it's a great effort, and I think Sean and the team have done a wonderful job, and I encourage you all to make your submissions. As I said, we're involved in a process here. We don't determine the application, and nor does anyone else here. It'll go through that process of assessment and review, and ultimately something will be approved that reflects what council have laid down for that site. So, and again, from my part, we wrote to the elected councillors in June of last year outlining what we were proposing for this site. We gave them an indicated yield of between 70 to 100 dwellings and access only from Kopa Street. And in the 4.5 months before we lodged that DA, we had numerous meetings with council staff working through development issues, and I did not receive one inquiry or receive one note of concern from any one of those elected councillors. 4.5 months they had to provide input to this process. I tried to get meetings with the Mayor. I pursued her office on at least 3 occasions, and no meeting was made to discuss certain elements around this proposal. So I think what you're doing is great. As I said, I live locally and I love the community, but don't just focus on this, focus on what you can do more broadly for the community. We've nominated the council that perhaps they should be talking to the RMS about acquiring the land on the south side of Dudley Road for an urban park. At this stage, I don't know what's happened with that. Okay, so there are opportunities about looking at the development of the land further down along the East Charlestown bypass corridor. Okay, you need to work with council if you want this vision to be, I guess, espoused through their planning controls, so that we avoid circumstances like this where we get to the end point in the process and we're at a point of disagreement. Thank you.
But we don't want
I cry for you, mate. I really cry for you.
Okay, so Councillor Brian Adamthwaite would like to respond to that.
I hadn't intended to speak this afternoon, but I think it's worth a response to that monologue. There are certain circumstances that you probably should be made aware of Number one is the original zoning was in fact part of a process that was motivated by state government. But the elected councillors, once the DA was lodged and we were made aware of it, responded immediately to look at the situation and support the community in their desires to get some modifications. Again, we're not against development. We're in favour of appropriate development. At this point in time, the council staff are working on a report for the councillors based on our concerns. And those concerns involve issues that may well have been raised by Wade that we have concerns with, and we completely disagree with the way in which they have made certain calculations in terms of council regulations, which will of course become part of the report that we present. So I think to characterise the situation as being it's all the council's fault is not unfair, it's untrue. The council has a responsibility and the council is taking its role seriously in that. I can't speak for those people who are not here, but I am aware that there may have been some meetings that were not attended, and I may be aware of some circumstances in which the developers may not responded as effectively, carefully and in communication with council as they perhaps could have done. So in any circumstance, there are two sides to every story. And I think you need to be well aware of the fact that we as elected councillors are supporting you in having changes made to this development. We are working within the framework that are presented to us, and we are using the guidelines that councils over the years have developed. And it's not as simple as saying council's letting it happen. That's not the case.
Okay.
Question of
All
council.
right, so I'll wrap up.
Does council have a plan for this corridor?
At this point in time, it's been raised by council a number of times to try and have a plan for this corridor.
no?
The point is that it's not just the council's responsibility. We have to get the state government together, and Councillor Langford, for one, has raised this issue a number of times at council to try and get the state government together with the council to have a cohesive strategic plan for the whole area, not just the piecemeal approach that's here at the moment. So at the moment there isn't, but we are one of the organisations that's trying to get it done.